Do your worst. Do whatever you can to scare me. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I hope you're having a good October. This is my favorite time of the year. This is when all the great horror films come out. October and Halloween is kind of a month-long celebration for me. I'm sure it is for you. And I'm here to tell you about a really cool horror film that you have to see. I've never seen anything quite like it. And we have to talk to Josh Ruben because he is the actor, one of the lead actors in this, writer and director behind Scare Me. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast, Josh. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited because this movie, I've never seen anything quite like this film. And I kind of feel like just from the premise, and the premise is really simple. It's, you're a screenwriter and you're trying to write this thing. And so you're going off to this deserted kind of cabin to get away from it all. You run into another writer that might be a little bit more, a little bit more successful than you. And you just are trying to scare each other. And it escalates from there. I kind of feel, and first of all, it's such a simple premise, but the way it's told and is just so clever, the way that you use sound, where you really get into the stories. Was the development of this concept, did it come from pitching a movie? I kind of feel like some of it came from that.
Well, years of rejection and budget restrictions probably certainly led to me being the lead in the movie, directing the movie, deferring my payment to the point where I legally could. But no, I love soundscapes. I love sound design. It's such a big part of comedy and a big part of some of my most favorite films that inspired Scare Me, like, Killing of the Sacred Deer, those longer, kind of odd, irreverent Yorgos Lanthimos takes. And what James Wan did in Insidious had quite an influence, along with all the classics and all the anthologies that I grew up loving and watching. But it is truly a composer and a sound designer's film, simply by nature of I guess a personal exercise to see how effective performance, how effective a horror comedy talkie could be.
Well, it's a simple thing to say, it's all takes place in this one location and whatnot. But really, it's the theater of the mind that takes you out of all of that. As you and what your character's name is, Fred, and she's I forget her.
Fanny. Yeah.
Why could alliteration? I
know. That's basically why I was like, well, these will be easy-ish.
But the chemistry you have with Aya Cash, the sort of comedic and the sort of one-upsmanship is the thing that really makes it. Did you workshop it a little bit with her, and kind of, because I'm sure you had to sell her on this thing because it's all driven by your performances.
It really is. I mean, we read it once and didn't have much rehearsal time. I think we had, about a half day to just sort of, more showing Aya and Chris, sort of the corners of the room, how we're going to break down the set to essentially compartmentalize the shooting of it. More than say, let me see the entire monologue. It's more sort of, well, here's where we'll be, and sort of talking out some choices. But yeah, I needed to convince her a bit, and luckily she trusts me. I am a friend of her husband's and have been for many years. We shared a voiceover agent in New York ages ago, and so we'd known of each other, and she was somehow willing to come aboard and do this thing. And I think a big piece of her and Chris being aboard is they are bold performers, but they come from the live performance world. Aya was kind of born in theater, and it shows. And that was a big part of kind of what I was seeking in an actress to spar with.
And what were some of the horror influences for you in putting this together?
I mean, yeah, it's, there are so many that are sort of more on the nose, everything from, oh gosh, again, Insidious, and I know Killing of the Sacred Deer and certainly The Lobster and Dogtooth aren't necessarily horror films, but what references aren't quite on the nose, like Silver Bullet, There's a lot probably spiritually that's there just by nature of the fact that the creator, me, the writer was born watching everything from Freddy's Nightmares and Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, to Alien, Cat's Eye, and Jaws. And so if there isn't, if there aren't, many on the nose references to those films and nods, of which there are some of the aforementioned, there's probably stuff that feels like other movies. And I'm really curious to hear what horror fans who watch this, feel it's a motive of. But I'd say, Dead by Dawn is one of my absolute favorites. And even though it's not Sam Raimi wild, that's one that I've absolutely, played thousands of times and watched thousands of times and love. So it's probably spiritually there. But I think, I set out to make that kind of midnight movie, brighter 80s horror anthology type of film that I would pop on and watch to kind of forget about the horrors of the world, oddly enough, as a shy kid with very few friends. And even though there is a bit of a social commentary undercurrent, that was kind of the goal, is, all right, let me just at least try and put on, create the sort of movie that I would want to watch and not think too much about, like put on in the background, funny faces and silly voices. And yeah.
But I love the way that you do use the social commentary. It's not hit you over the head. It's just kind of woven in the fabric of the story. So it perfectly fits. The other thing about the film, you mentioned the sound design earlier. I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's a thing that immediately struck me, because I feel like a lot of people are going to see this movie and they're going to feel like horrible things happen in this film. And they kind of do. They do. But I mean, almost in the way that now we get in discussions with people about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You don't really see a lot in that film. A lot of it is shot in close up, and a lot of it is sound effects. And I feel like in a way you use those same tools, and it just shows you how powerful sound is, especially for horror and genre films.
Absolutely. We're so inundated with the cutty, punchy, bloody, gory type of film. I probably will never see Hostel. I've watched all the Saw movies, I think, in one sitting once, just to sort of, have a Halloween kind of go at it. But I'm not a gore type horror fan or maker. I've realized that's something that I've kind of, I found in myself. I probably will never be able to watch The Human Centipede, but I loved Freddy Krueger and where he went, especially. I mean, the range Craven took us from truly dark at the get to, Dream Warriors and Freddy's Dead territory when things got quite cartoonish. If you boil it down, I mean, you go back to the who was it, Whale, who did the original, at least some of the original, monster movies. I mean, we're talking about minimalist set pieces and camera work. It's all performance. So much of it's performance and makeup and sound design and sort of setting. And yeah, I think ultimately we sort of set out to go like, hey, let's see if this kind of idea works. And it's, essentially how I talk to myself and imagined stuff as a kind of kid with a big imagination and few friends, creating these worlds in my head, or just sort of scaring myself, talking to myself and creating, imaginary worlds and friends and the like. As I became a better filmmaker from, doing everything from college humor to commercials, I kind of realized, oh shit, I think there's a way to create what's up here on screen, but maybe just kind of by, telling stories at the campfire, doing an anthology that never leaves the campfire.
It completely works. And I think what's underestimated is also the comedy. I don't want to ask about that. Like, you are in an elite group of filmmakers now in the year 2020. You have seen your movie with an audience. So
yeah, right. Yeah, I was at the last film festival, in-person film festival, maybe ever, with Sundance 2020, the super spreader event that was, yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk about that? Like, I mean, it is, I this year, every film festival under the sun is now, virtual premieres and Zoom call panels and whatnot, but you were fortunate enough to see your film at Sundance. Can you talk about that experience?
I got to say, so one of the wonderful things that they do, the Sundance Institute, is they sort of prep you in advance as a first time attendee. first time, filmmaker going to the festival. And one of the things they say is don't get overwhelmed by trying to see everything, go to every party and do everything. And I was on the clock. I had 48 hours at Sundance. I missed all but the opening night screening of our film to to actually get back to upstate New York to start prep on Werewolves Within, which is my second feature film that kind of came out of absolutely nowhere with Ubisoft. So I had this sort of wonderful position to go and enjoy it, but Sundance encouraged you, said don't worry about going to everything, just enjoy what you do with your friends. And so I found, as moving and as wonderful it was to kind of go through the whirlwind of doing everything from talking to the Maltons to like Leonard Maltin on camera overlooking Main Street to introducing the film and doing a Q&A at 2:30 in the morning or whatever it was, because we were a midnight movie. The best part was, being at the condo with, my cinematographer and his fiance and my fiance and, the composers, Chris Maxwell and Phil Hernandez, and just enjoying ourselves,
Well, I got to say, those are my favorite kind of moments too. I feel like I try to mostly see documentaries when I go to Sundance because I don't know if those are even going to get released. But
good call. That's great.
Yeah. And then, but those kind of social moments are the best. I love just walking up Main Street and running into friends.
That's what you gotta do and enjoy. I mean, that's all you can do, because it's such a circus,
The circus is kind of taken over at Sundance now, but I'm really just excited for horror fans to see this, because it's not like a type of film they're used to. And I'm like you, as much as my last name is Gore, I'm not a fan of gore in horror films. I think psychological horror is far more effective. It just worms its way into your brain in a way that's just more impactful. And this film totally does it. Also using humor, which I you did so well.
Jennifer Kent did it beautifully too. I mean, the Babadook, I think, just like what they did with images, and even stuff like Donnie Darko. It's just that the silhouette of a man in a bunny costume with a messed up face in a dark corridor. Or more recently, I mean, to hand out some more Shudder love, I'm such a fan of Host, which is a 57-minute horror film, that embraces the kind of, the stuff that Paranormal Activity, put Paranormal Activity on the map, but then, accelerate it, like, put threw gas on the fire, and escalated it. And it's still so impactful. The dark corners of a room and minimalist sounds and reaction, and so in this case, in the case of Scare Me, it's performance and commitment and, humor to boot.
And a great cast. You deserve accolades for putting the cast together, yourself included.
Thank you.
Well, the movie Scare Me is out and available for everyone to see, at least by the time that we run this interview. And I want to thank you, Josh Ruben, for being on the Film Threat podcast. I want to thank our sponsor, Storyblocks. Go to storyblocks.com/film threat. Josh, congratulations.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad you like the movie. It really means a lot.
Loved it. Take care.
You too.